They called it a routine flight. UPS Flight 2976, a Boeing 767 cargo plane traveling from Louisville to Miami on a clear night with perfect visibility. But at 12:37 a.m., something catastrophic happened. The aircraft that had been cruising at 32,000 feet simply vanished from radar screens, disintegrating mid-air and scattering debris across 5 square miles of remote Tennessee countryside. 2 experienced pilots gone in an instant. Captain Michael Henderson and First Officer Rebecca Torres never even had time to complete their Mayday call. But what makes this tragedy truly chilling isn't just how it happened, but how easily it could have been prevented. 12 seconds. That's all the time the pilots had between the first warning alarm and complete structural failure. 12 seconds to understand what was happening, to react, to try to save their aircraft as the fuselage literally tore itself apart around them. The cockpit voice recorder captured only a fragment of Captain Henderson's final words. "Mayday, Mayday, we're losing contact," before all systems failed simultaneously. The violent decompression happened so quickly that investigators say death would have been instantaneous. But here's what haunts aviation experts. The signs of impending disaster had been flashing for months. What the National Transportation Safety Board discovered in their investigation defies belief. Not 1, not 2, but 7 separate warning reports about pressurization issues with this exact aircraft had been filed in the 3 months before the crash. 7 red flags that something was seriously wrong. 7 opportunities to prevent 2 deaths. And every single one of those warnings disappeared into a digital black hole, never reaching the maintenance teams who could have saved those lives. How does something like this happen in an industry obsessed with safety? The answer lies in what investigators call the deadliest form of miscommunication. Not when information is wrong, but when critical information never reaches the people who need it most. The NTSB's preliminary report sent shockwaves through the aviation community when it revealed that a software update, installed 6 months before the crash, had inadvertently created a fatal flaw in UPS's maintenance reporting system. Reports categorized as intermittent or non-critical were automatically redirected to a secondary review queue. A queue that, by the time of the accident, had accumulated over 350 unprocessed reports. Hidden among them were all 7 warnings about Flight 2976's pressurization problems. What makes this discovery so disturbing is that each layer of safety protocols functioned exactly as designed. The pilots reported the issues, the aircraft's sensors detected the anomalies. Even a ground mechanic had noted an irregularity during a routine inspection. The information existed. The knowledge that could have prevented this tragedy was captured, documented, and saved in UPS's sophisticated digital system. But due to a perfect storm of software classification errors and overwhelmed data analysts, these warnings never triggered effective alarms. The catastrophic failure began 45 minutes into the flight when the aircraft reached cruising altitude. The cockpit voice recorder captured the sudden blare of decompression warnings as the cabin pressure began dropping rapidly. Henderson and Torres immediately initiated emergency procedures, requesting clearance to descend to 10,000 feet, where pressurization would no longer be necessary for survival. Air traffic control granted immediate authorization. But what no one realized was that this wasn't a simple pressurization issue. It was the symptom of something far more sinister. Forensic analysis of the wreckage revealed the horrifying truth. The fuselage section, where intermittent pressurization failures had been occurring, had developed microscopic stress fractures. These tiny cracks, impossible to detect in regular visual inspections, had been progressively expanding over months. When the aircraft began to depressurize during that final flight, the pressure differential reached a critical point. In seconds, one of the fractures catastrophically expanded, triggering a cascading structural failure that literally tore the aircraft apart. The tragedy of Flight 2976 represents a frightening new category of aviation disaster, one where the failure isn't mechanical or human in the traditional sense, but informational. A breakdown in how critical safety data flows through increasingly complex digital systems. As one senior NTSB investigator put it, this aircraft didn't crash because something broke. It crashed because the right information never reached the right people. For the families of Henderson and Torres, the revelation that their loved ones' deaths could have been prevented with better information management has been devastating. Catherine Henderson, the captain's widow, spoke through tears at a press conference following the NTSB's preliminary findings. Michael faithfully reported every issue with that aircraft. He did everything right. He trusted the system to keep him safe, and that system failed him completely. The implications extend far beyond one tragic flight. Aviation experts are now asking deeply uncomfortable questions. How many other potential warnings are currently buried in maintenance queues across the industry? How many other aircraft might be flying with similar problems, whose alerts are stuck in some digital limbo? If a company with UPS's reputation for rigorous safety standards could experience this kind of systemic failure, what about the rest of the industry? The case has prompted the FAA to launch an industry-wide audit of maintenance reporting systems, with particular focus on how digital tools categorize, prioritize, and escalate safety concerns. Early findings suggest that UPS is far from alone in having created sophisticated data collection systems that may be inadvertently filtering out crucial information. What happened to Flight 2976 forces us to confront a disturbing paradox of our digital age. We can be simultaneously drowning in data, yet starving for the information that truly matters. The pilots, the sensors, the mechanic, they all tried to sound the alarm. The tragedy isn't that no one spoke up. It's that an automated system designed to enhance safety effectively silenced their warnings. If you're watching this video, take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth investigations like this one. In the next segment, we'll dive deeper into exactly how UPS's reporting system worked, what went wrong with the software update, and the stunning timeline of missed opportunities that led to this preventable disaster. As we unravel this case, we're confronted with perhaps the most chilling question of all. In our increasingly automated world, where complex systems make life or death decisions about what information deserves attention, what other warnings might be silently disappearing into digital oblivion right now? What other disasters are quietly building, their warning signs buried under algorithms and classifications designed with the best intentions? To understand how critical safety warnings could simply vanish, we need to examine the system that failed these pilots. 6 months before the crash, UPS had implemented what they called Project Digital Shield, a comprehensive software update to their maintenance reporting infrastructure. The system was designed to streamline communication between flight crews and maintenance teams, using sophisticated algorithms to categorize and prioritize thousands of daily reports. On paper, it represented the cutting edge of aviation safety technology. In reality, it created the perfect conditions for disaster. The timeline of missed warnings is enough to make your blood run cold. The first documented pressurization anomaly on the doomed aircraft occurred on February 12, 2025, exactly 94 days before the crash. Captain Sarah Mendez noted in her post-flight report intermittent cabin pressure fluctuations at 28,000 feet, resolved after cycling the system. The Digital Shield software automatically classified this report as non-critical because the issue had apparently resolved itself and tagged it for secondary review. Over the next 3 months, 6 more reports followed the same pattern. Different pilots, same aircraft, similar pressurization anomalies, all classified as intermittent or resolved in flight. These classifications were fatal. In the old system, every maintenance report was physically reviewed by a human technician regardless of severity. But Digital Shield created a two-tier approach: critical reports requiring immediate attention and non-critical reports placed in a separate queue for later review. As internal documents obtained by investigators revealed, this secondary queue had grown exponentially in the months following the software update. The maintenance review team, already understaffed due to recent budget cuts, quickly became overwhelmed. By April 2025, the backlog had reached 175 reports. By May, over 350. Hidden among them were all 7 warnings about Flight 2976's pressurization system, warning signs of the microscopic fractures that were slowly spreading with each pressurization cycle. What makes this failure particularly tragic is that it happened at a company renowned for its safety culture. UPS had invested millions in creating what they believed was the most advanced safety reporting system in the cargo aviation industry. But as Dr. Elena Kazan, aviation safety expert at MIT, explains, what we're seeing here is the automation paradox, when increased automation designed to improve safety actually introduces new, often less visible risks. They built a system so complex that its own complexity became the hazard. The most haunting near miss came just 3 weeks before the crash. During a routine inspection, UPS mechanic James Reardon noticed what he described as a slight irregularity along a fuselage seam of the aircraft. He attempted to document this observation in the maintenance system, but due to the specific terminology he used in the form, describing it as an observation rather than an anomaly, the system once again classified it as non-critical, sending it to the now massive backlog queue. Forensic analysis would later confirm that what Riordan had observed was likely visible evidence of the developing structural weakness. Had his report been properly classified and acted upon, a more thorough inspection would have revealed the spreading stress fractures before they became catastrophic. Instead, his warning became the final missed opportunity in a chain of failures that ultimately claimed 2 lives. The NTSB investigation also uncovered that the aircraft's automated sensor systems had been quietly logging abnormal pressure readings during several flights. This data was being captured and stored, but never triggered alerts because the deviations fell just below the threshold programmed into the monitoring system. These thresholds had been calibrated based on Boeing's specifications for normal operating parameters, but they failed to account for patterns of repeated anomalies that, while individually minor, collectively indicated a developing problem. What we're witnessing here is a new type of failure that safety experts are calling organizational silencing, when systems designed to enhance communication inadvertently suppress critical information. The pilots spoke up. The sensors recorded data. A mechanic noted an irregularity, yet somehow all these warnings were effectively silenced by the very system designed to amplify them. For Captain Michael Henderson's family, this revelation brings both closure and fresh anguish. Knowing that Mike did everything right, that he followed every procedure and still lost his life because warnings went unheard, it's unbearable, his brother Thomas told reporters. This wasn't just a computer glitch. Real human decisions created this system, and real humans failed to ensure it was working properly. The tragedy of Flight 2976 forces us to confront difficult questions about our increasing reliance on automated systems to manage safety-critical information. How do we ensure that in trying to filter the signal from the noise, we don't inadvertently filter out the signals that matter most? In the comments below, let us know if your industry relies on similar automated reporting systems. What safeguards exist to prevent critical information from being lost? In our next segment, we'll examine exactly what happened during those final 12 seconds of Flight 2976 and what the physical evidence tells us about the catastrophic structural failure that claimed 2 lives. What exactly happened during those final 12 seconds of Flight 2976? The forensic evidence pieced together by NTSB investigators tells a harrowing story of structural failure that unfolded with terrifying speed. By reconstructing the final moments using data from the flight recorders, radar tracking, and physical wreckage, investigators have created the most detailed timeline yet of how a seemingly minor issue escalated into catastrophic structural failure. At 12:36:48 a.m., the first cabin pressure warning activated in the cockpit. The aircraft was cruising at 32,000 feet in stable atmospheric conditions. Captain Henderson immediately acknowledged the alarm and initiated standard decompression procedures. First Officer Torres began the emergency descent request to air traffic control. All of this followed textbook protocols. What they couldn't have known was that the pressure fluctuation wasn't just a system malfunction. It was the beginning of structural failure. 7 seconds later, at 12:36:55 a.m., the cockpit voice recorder captured a distinct metallic groaning sound that experts have identified as the moment when one of the microscopic fractures along the rear fuselage suddenly expanded under pressure. 3 seconds after that, multiple warning systems activated simultaneously as the aircraft's sensors detected abnormal stress readings throughout the airframe. It was at this point that Captain Henderson began his mayday call. The final 2 seconds recorded a rapid cascade of failures. The voice recorder captured the sound of rushing air, followed by what analysts describe as a catastrophic separation event. The moment when the weakened fuselage section failed completely, tearing the aircraft apart. The recording ends abruptly at 12:37:0 a.m. Radar data shows the aircraft disintegrating, with the primary debris field spreading across 8 miles of rural Tennessee. What the wreckage revealed was even more disturbing than investigators initially suspected. When they recovered segments of the rear fuselage, they discovered evidence of extensive metal fatigue along a 8-meter section where 2 fuselage panels were joined. Microscopic analysis revealed thousands of minuscule cracks that had developed over time, weakening the structural integrity of the aircraft with each pressurization cycle. Dr. Robert Chen, metallurgist with the NTSB, explained the phenomenon. What we're seeing here is similar to what happens when you bend a paperclip back and forth repeatedly. Each bend weakens the metal slightly, until eventually it breaks. In this case, each time the aircraft pressurized and depressurized during normal operation, these microscopic cracks expanded ever so slightly. The alarming part is that these types of stress fractures are nearly impossible to detect through visual inspection until they're dangerously advanced. The pressurization issues reported by pilots over the previous months weren't just system malfunctions, they were symptoms of this developing structural weakness. Each time the aircraft experienced intermittent pressure fluctuations, it was because air was actually escaping through these expanding microfractures. Every flight was making the problem worse, bringing the aircraft one step closer to catastrophic failure. What's particularly chilling about this discovery is that once identified, the problem would have been relatively straightforward to address. According to Boeing's maintenance protocols, a standard ultrasonic inspection would have detected these fractures long before they reached critical levels. Such an inspection would have been automatically triggered if any of the 7 reported pressurization issues had been properly classified and escalated. The human toll of this communication breakdown cannot be overstated. Captain Michael Henderson was a 28-year veteran with over 22,000 flight hours. Colleagues described him as meticulous about safety procedures and aircraft maintenance. He left behind a wife of 32 years, Catherine, and two adult children. First Officer Rebecca Torres, 42, had risen through the ranks at UPS over 15 years and was known for her technical expertise. She is survived by her partner and 8-year-old twin daughters. Both pilots had done everything by the book. They had documented every anomaly, followed every procedure, trusted every system. As Catherine Henderson told the NTSB hearing through tears, the system didn't just fail the aircraft. It failed my husband. It failed their families. Perhaps most disturbing is that this type of failure represents an emerging blind spot in aviation safety. Commercial aviation has become remarkably safe over decades by addressing obvious mechanical failures and human errors. But the UPS tragedy reveals a new frontier of risk, failures in how information flows through complex digital systems designed to enhance safety. As Dr. Elena Kazan of MIT explains, we've gotten very good at designing aircraft that don't break and training pilots who don't make mistakes. But we're only beginning to understand how to build organizational systems that don't lose critical information. In some ways, these information flow failures are more insidious because they're invisible until disaster strikes. The investigation has prompted the FAA to issue an emergency directive requiring all airlines to conduct a comprehensive review of their maintenance reporting systems, with particular attention to how maintenance issues are categorized, prioritized, and escalated. Already, 3 major carriers have discovered significant backlogs in their secondary review queues, potentially containing critical safety information. Share this video with someone in the aviation industry or anyone who works with complex safety systems. In our next segment, we'll explore how UPS's corporate culture and recent cost-cutting measures may have contributed to the conditions that allowed these warnings to go unheeded, and the difficult questions this raises about the balance between efficiency and safety in high-risk industries. The tragedy of Flight 2976 wasn't born in isolation. A deeper investigation into UPS's operations reveals a troubling context that allowed this fatal communication breakdown to occur. 18 months before the crash, UPS had launched a company-wide efficiency initiative called Digital Transformation Acceleration, or DTA. On its surface, the program aimed to streamline operations through increased automation and digital tools. But internal documents obtained by investigators tell a more complex story about how financial pressures may have compromised safety. Email communications between senior management, revealed during the NTSB hearings, show that DTA had an explicit goal of reducing maintenance staffing costs by 22% over 3 years. One particularly disturbing email from a vice president to the head of maintenance operations read, "The new system should allow us to process the same volume of reports with significantly fewer eyes on paper. This is how we'll hit our DTA targets." Another internal presentation touted that the Digital Shield software would automatically filter out low-priority maintenance issues to focus human attention where it matters most. What no one seemed to question was who, or what, would determine which issues were low priority. The algorithm that made these life-or-death classifications was designed primarily by software engineers, with limited input from experienced maintenance personnel. As one whistleblower from UPS's IT department testified, there was tremendous pressure to get the system deployed on schedule. When maintenance experts raised concerns about the classification logic, they were told those issues would be addressed in version 2.0 after the initial rollout. That next version never came. Budget restrictions following the initial deployment led to postponement of planned improvements. Meanwhile, the secondary review queue, where non-critical reports accumulated, grew rapidly. The team responsible for reviewing this backlog had been reduced from 11 technicians to just 4 as part of the staffing efficiency goals. Former UPS maintenance supervisor Thomas Kelleher revealed that he had raised alarms about the growing backlog 3 months before the crash. "I told my director we were sitting on a potential time bomb. There was no way 4 people could effectively process hundreds of backlogged reports while keeping up with new incoming items." His response was that we needed to trust the system to properly prioritize truly important issues. This combination, an algorithm making critical safety decisions with inadequate oversight, reduced staffing for manual reviews, and growing pressure to cut costs, created the perfect conditions for critical information to slip through the cracks. As aviation safety expert Dr. Marcus Wong put it, "What we're seeing here is a classic case of normalization of deviance, the gradual acceptance of increasingly risky conditions because nothing bad has happened yet." But the investigation revealed an even more shocking twist. 2 months before the crash, an internal audit had actually flagged the exact issue that would later prove fatal. Julia Ramirez, a quality assurance specialist, had conducted a random sampling of the backlogged maintenance reports and discovered that approximately 8% contained issues that should have been classified as critical. She documented this finding in a report to management, specifically noting that pressurization issues were among those being incorrectly categorized. Ramirez's report included a recommendation for immediate review of all backlogged pressurization-related items and a temporary return to manual review of all new reports until the classification algorithm could be improved. Her report was acknowledged but designated as a post-Q3 action item, effectively postponing any response until after the quarterly financial results were reported to shareholders. Flight 2976 crashed 3 weeks before that financial quarter ended. This timeline has sparked outrage among aviation safety advocates and the families of the victims. "They knew," said Rebecca Torres's partner, Elena Diaz, during a press conference following these revelations. "They had the information that could have saved Becca's life sitting right there in a report, and they pushed it off because looking at it might affect their quarterly numbers." UPS has vigorously disputed this characterization, insisting that safety remains their top priority and that the postponement of the audit response was based on resource availability, not financial considerations. However, internal emails discussing the business impact of temporary maintenance process changes tell a different story. The investigation has uncovered what experts call the organizational root causes, the ways that corporate culture, financial pressures, and management decisions created an environment where a deadly mistake became not just possible, but probable. As NTSB Chair Marianne Richards stated during the public hearing, this wasn't a case of one person making a bad decision or one piece of equipment failing. This was a systemic breakdown in how safety-critical information flows through an organization. A breakdown that was ultimately enabled by a culture that allowed efficiency to quietly take precedence over safety. And comment below with your thoughts on how companies should balance efficiency goals with safety concerns. In our final segment, we'll examine the far-reaching implications of this tragedy for aviation safety worldwide and the difficult questions it raises about our growing dependence on automated systems to make life-or-death decisions. The tragedy of UPS Flight 2976 has sent shockwaves through the aviation industry, triggering what many are calling the most significant safety reassessment since the 737 MAX crisis. In response to the NTSB's findings, the FAA has issued Emergency Airworthiness Directive 2025-18-51, requiring all commercial operators to conduct immediate reviews of their maintenance reporting systems and backlog management. But the implications extend far beyond just fixing software algorithms. This disaster has exposed a frightening blind spot in our approach to safety in the digital age. For decades, aviation safety has focused on mechanical reliability and human factors. We've designed redundant systems, enhanced pilot training, and created rigorous maintenance protocols. But Flight 2976 reveals an entirely new category of risk: information flow failures within complex organizational systems. As safety expert Dr. Eleanor Kazan notes, we've been so focused on ensuring that planes don't break and pilots don't make mistakes that we've overlooked how easily critical safety information can get lost in increasingly complex digital systems. The legal consequences have already begun to unfold. The families of Captain Henderson and First Officer Torres have filed wrongful death lawsuits against UPS, Boeing, and the software developer that created the digital shield system. These cases may establish new precedents for corporate liability in cases where automated systems fail to properly escalate safety information. Beyond the specific parties involved, the entire aviation industry is watching closely, knowing that similar systems operate across virtually every airline. Perhaps most significantly, this tragedy has sparked a fundamental reconsideration of the relationship between humans and automated systems in safety-critical operations. The pendulum that had been swinging steadily toward increased automation and reduced human oversight is now swinging back. As former NTSB Chair James Hall stated in congressional testimony, "We've been seduced by the promise of technological solutions, believing that more data and more algorithms would automatically make us safer." Flight 2976 is a tragic reminder that technology doesn't reduce the need for human judgment and oversight, it transforms it. In direct response to the disaster, UPS has announced a complete overhaul of its maintenance reporting procedures. The new approach, developed in consultation with pilot and mechanic unions, includes mandatory human review of all reported maintenance issues regardless of automated classification, a safety override mechanism allowing any employee to flag items for immediate attention, and regular audits of backlogged items by independent safety specialists. The company has also created a memorial scholarship fund for students pursuing aviation safety careers, named after Henderson and Torres. But the most profound impact may be cultural. This disaster has forced a painful examination of how financial pressures and efficiency goals can gradually compromise safety systems. As one industry analyst observed, "The terrifying thing about this accident is that no one at UPS woke up that day intending to cut corners on safety. They built what they genuinely believed was a state-of-the-art safety system, but a series of seemingly rational business decisions, staff reductions, postponed upgrades, pressure to meet financial targets, created the conditions for disaster." For the families of Michael Henderson and Rebecca Torres, no systemic change can bring back their loved ones, but they have become powerful advocates for a new approach to safety. Catherine Henderson, speaking at a recent aviation safety conference, delivered a message that resonated throughout the industry. "My husband didn't die because an aircraft failed. He died because an organization failed. And until we treat organizational failures with the same seriousness as mechanical failures, we'll continue to lose lives needlessly." The legacy of Flight 2976 will likely be a fundamental reimagining of safety management in complex organizations. Already, industries far beyond aviation, from healthcare to nuclear power to maritime shipping, are examining their own information flow systems in light of the NTSB's findings. The critical question being asked is deceptively simple but profoundly challenging. How do we ensure that the information captured by our increasingly sophisticated digital systems actually reaches the people who need it most? As we've seen throughout this investigation, this wasn't a case of information not existing. The warnings were there. The signs were detected. Multiple people and systems tried to sound the alarm, but a series of organizational failures enabled by digital systems designed with the best intentions prevented those warnings from saving lives. If there's one lesson we should take from this tragedy, it's that the most dangerous failures in our modern world may not be mechanical or even human in the traditional sense. They're informational, breakdowns in how critical knowledge flows through complex systems, and addressing these failures will require not just better technology, but a fundamental commitment to valuing safety over efficiency, substance over process, and human judgment over automated convenience. Please share this video with anyone who works in a safety-critical industry. The lessons of Flight 2976 extend far beyond aviation, and understanding them could save countless lives. Thank you for watching this investigation. I'm Presenter Name for Channel Name, reminding you that in our connected world, the most important connections are still the ones between human beings who care enough to speak up and listen when safety is on the line.